Okay, hi everybody, this is Cups, and bringing you another Monster Hunter World video, and today we're going to be talking about the Charge Blade. Now, there's kind of a lot of information out there about the Charge Blade. It's kind of a complex weapon. It's kind of scaring people off with how high the difficulty level is on it, which I wouldn't say that it's really difficult, but it has a bit higher of a skill floor than a lot of the other weapons. So I just wanted to create a quick guide. We'll start with the weaknesses first. The weaknesses of the weapon is that to get to do some real damage with the weapon, it does have some higher motion values. Some things like motion values are how long or how slow the attacks hit. The mechanics of maintaining charge on the Phials while maintaining charge on the sword. Dispelling Phials fast enough so that you can load more. The mechanics of loading the Phials into the shield, charging your sword, and stuff like that. It takes a lot of balance and kind of like a lot of awareness on your part. Getting proficient with guard points is something that's very difficult for a lot of people. And some of the strengths of the weapon is that it has tremendous amount of burst damage. You have a lot of control over the monster with natural mind's eye if you charge your sword. It's really easy to get guard 4 or guard 5 on the weapon, which we'll explain here in a little bit. Also, Charge Blade doesn't really have too many bad matchups in the game. It does pretty well against most, if not all, the monsters in the game. The way that you want to take a look at the Charge Blade is take a look at the top left there. There's the little sword icon, there's the little shield icon, and then there's the Phials. And the Phials are kind of the huge mechanic to all this. So what you want to do is attack the monster to build the Phial energy up. And there's a couple attacks like you can just do, like these normal attacks here that somewhat build up Phials. See how it's kind of starting to build it up a little bit. But the main bread and butter that you want to do is charge with the circle attack. The charge double slash, that's the one that really builds a lot of heat. And then what you want to do is whenever it turns yellow, gives you half the Phials, and then red gives you the full amount of Phials. So you want to hit R2 to block, and then load them into your shield with load the Phials with R2 and circle. And then now you're free to attack again. If you heat up the Phials too much, then you start to dink. So once you have your Phials loaded, you're ready to go. So what you want to do is start to load them in a Phial load them into your shield by you want to cancel the animation of the super amped elemental discharge. So start spamming triangle and circle, triangle and circle, triangle and circle, triangle and circle, and cancel it with R2. So block whenever you're in the amped elemental discharge or super amped elemental discharge. And now your shield's loaded. This gives your shield a natural +2. So you'll see on a lot of Charge Blade sets that they have guard 1 built into it. This makes your shield have guard 3. Just by standing here and blocking, this is now guard 3. And whenever you guard point, which again we'll get into it in a little bit, that gives you guard 5. So now that you have the shield charge, you're ready to do the super amped elemental discharge. And that's the big swing, 200 motion value, hard-hitting attack that dumps all your Phials onto the ground. But how you need to get those Phials is just keep attacking, build the Phials up, and now you have your Phials and your shield loaded, so you're ready to super amp elemental discharge. And this is the do. Now impact Phials, there's two different Phial types. There's the impact Phial, which is physical stun type damage that scales heavily off of your attack, and there's elemental, and elemental is based off of elemental attack, obviously. And impact Phial travels in a narrow path, like kind of like a straight line like this. Now, the elemental travels in like a V shape like this. Whenever you're attacking stuff, you want to build more Phial heat, and then now you're ready to charge them into your sword. Now you can do R2 and circle, hold triangle down. Whenever it locks into position, you let go. So now what this does is it gives your weapon a little bit of elemental damage or impact, depending on what the Phial type is. And you would usually dink on this, but it gives you natural mind's eye. The sword at its base level, the charge lasts for 45 seconds. The shield at its base level charges for 2.5 minutes. That's kind of like the introductory thing. Attack the monster, get Phials, load Phials into your shield, keep building Phials, and then throwing as many supers as you can. In the previous games, you've been wanting to do a lot more amped elemental discharge, and you do that by doing the super animation, but then pushing back in triangle. And that's the amped elemental discharge. That only dispels 1. It's a little bit faster, it's a little bit safer. It has a little bit higher stun to it. So if you think a monster might be close to stun, you can snipe their head with that and most likely knock them out. the meta game in this one in World is basically just trying to build as many Phials and throw as many supers as you possibly can. The amped elemental discharge is a little bit more circumstantial than it has been. And so you basically just kind of want to try to stay in sword and shield form as much as you can until the opportunity presents itself to throw a super amped elemental discharge out. And you do have some mobility options with it. A lot of people kind of give it grief for being like a not very mobile weapon, but I think it's because they don't really know how to use it. You can do triangle. Like after you attack, you can do a little side hop, and you can also do a spinning slash out of it, which is quite nice. It's really good for, and especially like if you block or something like that, you can, let's say that we attack this here, and it hits us back. You can side hop and side slash out of it, and you also have your sliding slash, which you do by pushing a direction, and so you do an attack or a block or something, or yeah, it's got to be an attack. And then pushing a direction and circle out of it. And you can do this in any direction. You could go forward, backwards, side to side. And that's pretty good for, let's say you're hitting the tail of a monster while it's running away. You can chase after it. Or if you need to kind of get underneath some things like Diablo's horn swipes. And what's also really nice about the sliding slash is that since most of the time your super amped elemental discharge is a 3-step process, 1, 2, 3, to get the super, right? The sliding slash is that it already counts as 1 step for it. So let's say you slide, that's 1, 2, 3. To knock down or trip up the monster, you're going to want to be aiming for the head a lot, and the front legs or the back legs, whatever, will trip up the monster so that the monster can go to the ground, and then you're able to throw out your huge motion value moves. I can't really recommend just throwing these out, unless you think you might get a stun on the monster, you think you might get it tripped up, or you think it might be close to death or something like that. You're basically going to want to try to play pretty safe. Now, guard point is something that seems to just kind of blow people's mind, right? Like they see people doing all kinds of crazy stuff with guard points. I think guard points is kind of the thing that scares people the most. And I don't think people really understand what guard pointing is. And guard pointing is basically, it's a parry type maneuver where there's some moves that the charge blade has that the shield automatically goes in front of the person. And you'll see this a lot with like spinning slash. See how the shield kind of goes in front of the hunter? That automatically counts as like a parry or a block for yourself. And not only that, but it's a stronger version of a block. So kind of as we said before, when your shield is charged, it's +2. And whenever you guard point, it's +4. Presents an opportunity to take less chip damage, less stamina loss, less sharpness loss on your weapon. Oh, another good thing about guard points is that it charges your Phials a little bit as well. So if you're at kind of like 1 or 2 hits left from yellow Phials to red Phials, sometimes you might want to wait around a little bit to get a guard point so that you can charge red Phials. This is like an evade and counter type of game, right? A lot of people play weapons that they need to roll around a lot, but I see people rolling way too much with charge blade. You pretty much don't really need to ever roll. You can just block or guard point pretty much everything in the game. And if it's something that you can't guard point in the game, like a Teostra Supernova or something like that, you really shouldn't be in that situation in the first place. The most common one that I'm going to recommend to you guys is just doing the R2 and triangle. And that animation of you putting your sword into the shield is going to be your main bread and butter. And since I said a major strength of the weapon of Charge Blade is that you're able to keep it out and do a lot of stuff. You can move around, you can go side to side. The animation of you taking the weapon off your back with R2. So if you just push R2, that animation right there where the shield comes in front of you is the guard point. And that one's a little bit tricky. That one's not very forgiving and it's very quick, but it can still do the job sometimes. Sometimes, let's say you're fighting like a Lunastra or something that will aggro you on sight. Usually the monster opens up a hunt with a roar. So you can run at the monster, and whenever you see that they're about to roar, you can take the weapon off your back and guard point that. Or let's say a Diablo's just charging you or something like that. It's kind of a, oh crap, like I need to guard point this or try to block this somehow. Being confident and being able to stand right in front of the monster and get your guard points off and do your counterattacks and stuff like that is huge. And you should be trying to practice it as often as you can. You might have to take a couple steps back as a player before you can take a couple steps forward. The major benefit of guard pointing is not only does it reflect a little bit of elemental or impact damage depending on what you're using back on the monster, but mainly, as we talked about before, the super amped elemental discharge is a 3-step process. But whenever you guard point, you can immediately throw out a super amped elemental discharge. So if you block something that the monster does that's really big and slow, like a Nergigante head smash or something like that. There's a lot of times where if you guard point it, you're able to immediately counterattack and get a free super amped elemental discharge, which in the later states of the game can be 1600 damage, which is a huge part of the fight. But this is a good way of practicing your charge blade guard points, is you can kind of go into training room and practice against this bomb like I have been. But basically you just want to go against monsters and stand in front of them and be brave, and just get your guard points off. You're not going to get any better if you don't practice them. What's really number one important for charge blade that I'm going to recommend on all your charge blades is the focus. Now what focus does is it makes it so that your condensed, or your charge slash, this one here, charges a little bit faster, which is kind of nice, and it seems a little secondary. But the main thing that focus 3 lets you do is it lets you get full red Phials off a jump slash, charge slash, and then the spinning slash. So one combo gets you full red Phials. Whereas when you don't run focus, you have to do charge slash, stab, charge slash, and that, you know what I mean? That's just one more thing on that. So I'm going to recommend focus 3 on pretty much all your charge blade sets. And it's not like I see a lot of people saying that focus or focus 1 or focus 2. It has to be focus 3 or nothing at all, because you're not getting the full benefit out of it. But you're going to pretty much see every high-level player using focus. And then also the artillery versus elemental damage discussion. Artillery 1, 2, and 3 works only on impact Phials. And so this is going to be 10, 20, and 30% extra damage to just your impact Phials. So if you're using an elemental charge blade like the ice one or something like that, you want to stack ice elemental damage in there, or thunder, or whatever one you're using. But artillery does not affect elemental Phials at all. And another one, a must-have that I'm going to recommend on all your charge blade sets, is at least guard 1. Because as we talked about before, when your shield is charged, it's going to be guard 3. And then whenever you guard point, it's going to become guard 5. The non-elemental boost is always really important on the non-elemental charge blades, just because it's 10% extra raw damage, which equates over to your charge blade, your impact Phials. You also kind of see the discussion on if sharpness is worth it or not on charge blade, and I say that just a little bit. You kind of want to have that middle ground. You don't want to have full, you don't want to dump all your skill points into handicraft, just because you do a decent amount of sword attacking and axe attacking, and your super amped elemental discharge hits twice, 2 axe hits, and then all the Phial hits as well. So you want to make sure that you're hitting decently hard on those, and that's why a decent amount of crit as well, to get yourself out of negative and sometimes into the positive with things like weakness exploit, critical eye, and then maximum might are also quite important, because it'll let you get those extra damage. And it's a 200 motion value move, which means it hits really hard, so getting the crits on that can make a difference between KOing a monster and finishing a hunt really quickly or not. Also, people kind of overvalue attack. Whenever the game first came out, impact Phials scaled a little bit differently off of attack boost, so it was really beneficial to stack as much attack as possible so that your Phials were going to hit really hard. But that's been nerfed a couple times, so a lot of people still overvalue attack. I'd say if you're going to do attack, probably 4 or nothing at all, so that you get the little affinity. But the difference between 0 attack and 4 attack is 1 extra Phial damage. So every time you throw out a super, that's 6 extra damage, which is kind of negligible. I think I'd recommend making sure that you get your artillery and getting your guard in, and getting a few extra levels of crit and stuff like that, because overall, over the course of the fight, that's going to be really nice. And also for the augmentations, I'd probably recommend affinity. It's going to be a little bit circumstantial as well, depending on how high the affinity of the weapon that you're using, but most of the charge blades run a little bit low on the affinity. The augmentations are the attack increase. You see those from time to time as well. Attack increase on your augmentations typically going to give you about like 1 extra Phial damage. So if you have good affinity, then just go ahead and stack attack, because the extra Phial damage and extra sword damage and all that stuff is going to be great. And let's see here. Another high level one is capacity boost, as we've already talked about before. It gives you 1 extra Phial for your super amped elemental discharges, and also gives you about 30 extra seconds on your charge. But this is kind of a cookie cutter impact charge blade set. When it comes to augmentations, I would say priority number 1 is always health regen. Whenever you're hitting the monster, unless you're doing some kind of speed running or something like that, you pretty much always want to use health regen, because whenever you throw out your super amped elemental discharges, you're going to get about 60 to 70% of your life back, depending on how much you hit. Another thing that kind of goes overlooked is the maximum might. Maximum might is quite good on Charge Blade, just because, like I said, whenever you get to a certain level, you're not really going to be rolling around all that often. You're going to be running around and, you know, blocking and stuff like that. And whenever you, like I said, whenever you get good at guard pointing, the chunking. Well, I don't even have my shield charged right now. The stamina chunking isn't really going to be all that big of a deal. And also, by the time that the super amped element of discharge actually comes out, you're already at full stamina anyway by the time it hits the monster. So you're going to be able to enjoy as many levels of maximum might that you're able to get on there. And right now on PC, the console is enjoying a little bit of different things right now. There's a couple good charge blades that have come out with the Kiar set, the Arch-Tempered Cult Taroth. There's the Ice Charge Blade that have kind of brought Elemental back into the limelight, as well as kind of the Decay is also pretty good. The Fire... The ice one is really what we're worried about, but for most starting, beginning, end game charge blade, it's the Diablos Tyrannus 2 or the Cult of Taroth variant, the Taroth Strongarm Horn. This is kind of effective for 99% of the hunts in the game, and we're not even quite sure how strong the ice charge blade is yet. In some situations, the Diablos charge blade is still outperforming, and these weapons are basically the same, except the Taroth Strongarm Horn has a little bit extra ice, which, as we've already said, you're using this one for raw, not for elemental damage, and 25% extra, or 25 extra bonus, which when your character has 500 defense, 25 isn't really all that much, considering that it's like, you know, it's on a slope. The difference between 475 and 500 defense is really negligible. And have fun. So I'll see you. This has been Cups. Like, comment, subscribe if you like what you saw. Share the video if you think somebody needs it, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.